Hi there, and welcome to Be a Global Citizen, the podcast that explores the concept of global citizenship through the lens of value-creating education. My name is Scott Bauer, and I'm a SOCA researcher and educator. I hope you find the discussions, stories, and insights on this podcast to be valuable and inspiring as we strive to become global citizens who are committed to living a contributive life. Enjoy.
Hi, I'm Sheila Nabanja. I'm co-founder and executive director of the Musizi University Foundation that's supporting the launch of Musizi University in Uganda. We welcome our first cohort of students in January 2027. Musizi University is going to be the first liberal arts college in Uganda that will be grounded in African realities, that will be rooted in ethics, but really standing on the foundation of technical rigor. And this is a call to transforming the education system in Uganda, moving away from the traditional methods that have not worked. And it's about time that we disrupt that.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Sheila, for joining me on the podcast. I am so honored to have a co-founder of a university and one that has such a big mission like Musizi to really lead the charge in terms of like liberal arts colleges and just, disrupting kind of what was previously in place for something that really can open up new possibilities for the youth of Africa, beyond just Uganda, but all of Africa. And it's so exciting to see this really come together. And, I've attended a recent event where I got to meet you, and it's just amazing to hear the stories coming together, the mission that you guys are really, working towards. It just seems like, there's such unity in the work that you're doing. And I'm so interested to know what brought you to this moment where you're kind of like, about to really launch into this exciting new chapter of not just your own career, but then also the history of your country in Uganda. So, I would love to hear a little bit more about your background as an educator and what were some of the important milestones that brought you to the work of starting and founding a university like Musizi.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Scott. Thank you for having me. Really looking forward to this conversation. My path has taken me across various continents and disciplines. And actually, I'm not an educator by background. And that circuitous path that I have taken has really been signature for me, professionally and personally. I grew up in Uganda, and from a young age, I understood something that shaped everything that would follow. I knew that if I wanted a certain kind of education and opportunity, I would have to leave home to get it. I was fortunate to receive scholarships that allowed me to leave Uganda. But before I even left, I was also fortunate to attend some of the best schools in Uganda. But even those weren't immune from the legacy of a post-colonial rote memorization education system that taught you what to think rather than how to think. But I was fortunate that I received scholarships that allowed me to study in the UK and then later the US. And those scholarships changed my life. First, they took me to the United World Colleges. I went to Atlantic College in Wales for high school, the last 2 years of high school. And then on to Macalester College, which is a small liberal arts college in Minnesota, in St. Paul, where I majored in the sciences. And I loved it. But what Mac, we call Macalester fondly Mac, what Mac gave me went far beyond my physics and math majors. I had the chance to wrestle with ethics and philosophy and language and religion and dance. And that exposure really taught me how to ask better questions and how to work in uncertainty, all the things that the foundation that hadn't been laid for me in Uganda. So that was a transformative experience. And so I remember thinking even at Macalester that these habits of mind are really stretching my mind in a way that I had never experienced. And there was some fear in that, because it was unfamiliar territory. I was afraid of failing. I was afraid of where the questions were going to take me. Would I recover from where the questions would take me, the questions that I inhabited in my own mind? But those habits of mind are what carried me into a career as an engineer in the Bay Area, where I've been trusted to lead complex, multidisciplinary, cross-functional teams at Apple, working on the Vision Pro program and Project Titan, which was Apple's self-driving car program. And then most recently at Cruise, also working on the autonomous vehicles, leading camera systems there. And the technical skills got me in the door, got me in the room for sure. But it was the breadth of my education at Macalester that made me effective once I was there. I still, when I left Macalester, I went to MIT and, going through an engineering program like that, I did my PhD in electrical engineering with a focus on optics and photonics, materials and devices. And that would prepare me for working in camera systems as I went to the Bay Area, as I came to the Bay Area and working out here. But really, I attribute my ability to straddle the deep tech and the understanding of who is my product serving. Why are we building this? Why does the world even care about the work that we're doing? Who does this product serve? Who does this product disenfranchise? With knowledge comes responsibility. Am I holding that knowledge with responsibility? When I interact with statistics, am I interacting with those statistics also responsibly? And now in the age of AI, as we're training all these models, are they being trained ethically? And so, long story short, yes, I ended up in the Bay Area, and I have navigated all that. But something has kept pulling at me. As real as the opportunities that I have been given to excel academically and professionally, that opportunity came with a cost associated to it. And that cost is real. The personal, cultural cost of having left home in order to access this education is something that I still hold. And I hold it. And when you aggregate my experience with thousands, millions like me in the diaspora who leave their countries to get an education in the US and the UK and wherever, it's an aggregated cost to where we're from. And so as I wrestled with that question, I started to think, what would it look like if young people had the ability to attend a world-class institution in Uganda, where they're from, solving problems that they recognize, looking left and right and seeing, other young people that they grew up with working together to solve real complex problems. And the answer to that question is Musizi University, that me and my co-founders are launching in Uganda. It will meet young people's ability and potential where it is. The goal is to produce graduates who will be able to not only launch ventures, but also the kind of people that think outside the box, that are thinking about ethics, they're thinking about empathy, they're thinking about broad inquiry and critical thinking as they go into their engineering on entrepreneurship ventures in a way that's very different from how the education system currently is in Uganda. And it's a very exciting opportunity because what we see is Musizi graduates, if this works, and we're optimistic that it will, what we see is Musizi graduates becoming the critical mass that that creates new pathways within education, within technology innovation in Uganda, and become the drivers of the infrastructure that will build Uganda's economy and across Uganda, beyond Uganda to Africa's economy in 5, 10, 20 years. I see multiple universities similar to Musizi that are doing something similar. And so across the continent, I see a vision where Musizi is one of several universities that have transformed education on the continent.
Wow. No, what an inspiring vision. And I love that this is a deeply, like, the story of Musizi is also a deeply personal one for you. And I appreciate you sharing with us your education background and, the acknowledgement that what you were afforded in terms of those opportunities and receiving of scholarships to study abroad was something that not everyone could access.
Mhm.
And that by in the eyes of a lot of people, you might like think, "Oh wow, like she's made it," right? And then once you get to the pinnacle, that's where you stay, right? That seemingly, right? As if you've carved this out for yourself. But what I really admire about your story is that you know, true to your training at McAllister or Mac, that you were asking these questions, right? It was never stopping, right? Of like, as you continue to enter into new spaces, work with different teams, engage and build like these really incredible products, but you still ask yourself these questions of like, wait, who is this product for? What is the purpose behind this, and how can this impact more people? And I find that it's no coincidence that you found yourself kind of drawn back to this idea of like, well, my roots being in Uganda, like how can I give back? And I'm curious, like, where was the seed? I mean, the seed of this, I think, is planted much deeper, back when, you were in Uganda. But in terms of the idea of a university, um, was it like a conversation, but, amongst your other co-founders, or what was the origin story there? Because I'm just curious, like, it's big thinking, right? But sometimes that big thinking happens over a cup of coffee, or like, could you bring us back to that moment and be really specific about who was there and what was happening?
Oh, I love this question so much. So one of the co-founders, Elaine Alomotovu, who sits in Uganda, and you didn't get a chance to meet Scott a few weeks ago when we were down in LA because she's in Uganda. So she and I went to high school together in Uganda. So we were 14 when we met on the school grounds. We were in the same stream, so classroom, for 4 years. And, we have completely different personalities, but we had our eye on each other just to, when you find another person in a classroom and you sort of mock them because you're like, this person, I could learn 10 things from them and still want to learn another 10. So we sort of had our eye on each other in that sense. And then when I was done with the 4 years and our paths diverged and I went to UWC, she continued on to finish high school in Uganda and then went on to university in Uganda. And in that time, we were sort of in touch, keeping up with each other's milestones when we graduated, when I went on to grad school, and when I defended my thesis. Typically when people defend their theses, there was a picture of them with like their thesis advisor and maybe a grant, a certificate, or maybe even their hood and gown. To commemorate the occasion, what I did was when you hand in your thesis to the thesis office, they hand you a little receipt, and it's not bigger than maybe 2 by 6 inches. Teeny, teeny, tiny, in exchange for 6 years of hard labor. And so I took a picture of that little receipt and I posted it. I think it was on FaceTime at the time. And Elaine was one of the first people that commented on it to say, Sheila, we're so proud of you. We're so proud of you. And I remember I let that sit, really land, because I looked back on my journey. I looked back on what enabled all of it, the forks in the road, going to UWC, then going to Macalester, which formed the foundation of my technical chops, and then MIT, and enduring all that was that came with that, and growing and becoming an engineer, and culminating into this moment that would then come full circle to my high school friend commenting on my little receipt. In that time, though, Elaine and I had been in touch, and I shared with her my Macalester experience, and and I shared, hey, this is how Macalester is structured academically. You can take sciences, but you can also take humanities classes. I remember sharing my UWC experience with her to say, this school is amazing. You learn global understanding and citizenship. And also my dorm roommates are from Japan and the Caribbean and Wales, and we come together and we talk about various things. Hegemony at 16 and 17, like how how is this even possible? So as we were in touch and I was sharing my experience, she was in Uganda, experiencing firsthand um, the the education system in Uganda, but also living it and making a career and establishing a career and getting married and having children. And then when she got to the point of some of her children had now gone through school and they were coming back with their term sheets and I guess the grades from their terms, and she saw that they were getting one of her sons, he was getting straight A's, and she often tells a story about how she loves her kids, and she was like, this genius that they're telling me that I have at home, I don't see how he has straight A's. And so she decided to peel back the onion, and she came to realize that they weren't being tested to the full extent that they should to earn the grades, the high grades that they were getting. And so that inspired her to launch her K through 12 school that would really teach understanding and comprehension and thinking outside the box and all those good things. But in that time, she was thinking about, okay, I'm educating these kids K through 12. She started with 30 students, and today she has over 800 and has been able to turn it into a profitable venture. A lot of people talk about starting schools in Africa. Very few people have operational experience. Elaine has that. And so as she was educating young people, she was always thinking about what comes next. After this excellent K through 12 experience, what happens to these young people? Are they then delivered back into the education system that she felt did not meet her at her potential? And so in that time, having shared my Macalester liberal arts education experience, she had somehow partnered with Takako. They had met and joined forces, and then they launched Musizi really as an idea, as a project about 4 years ago, but really built on the principles of a liberal arts education, the principles of broad inquiry, not just getting knowledge for knowledge's sake, but really expanding the mind and thinking about um, uncomfortable questions and getting to frontiers of one's understanding. But yeah, all that was sort of beautifully interwoven through personal stories, through journeys that took us in different directions, but in the intervening time, sharing what landed and what built us, and having that inform the Musizi story, having that inform how we then wanted to build Musizi in a way that was the kind of university that Elaine and I had wished we had the opportunity to apply to when we were 18, 17, looking for universities at that age.
Wow, what a beautiful story. I really appreciate you sharing this journey of Elaine, and how it dates back to high school years, right? And that kind of like mystic, like across the room, like there's something about that person that how could you have known at that moment what would, eventually transpire with her educational journey, your educational journey, and
Mm-hmm.
kind of converging. It's like you guys went off, took different paths, and then it it inevitably brought you back together despite the geographical distances, right? Of you being in the US and then her being in Uganda. I was really moved when you talked about the little ticket after you did your defense and how she was the first one to comment on that. I mean, I think
One of the
that
first
really,
ones. I have to actually go back and check. One of the first
yeah.
ones.
Let's look at the timestamp, okay? Let's see who actually got that. No, but either way, I mean, to comment on it at all, I think is significant because it speaks to this sincere desire that she must have had to see you
Mhm.
succeed, right, in the path that you went down, because she under, understood that it's not easy, right? I mean, getting going to another country and kind of staking it out and like doing your best there. I feel like she must have really been like so interested in like hearing those updates and those communications back and forth, and
Mhm.
it must have built not just the curiosity of like what your that experience was like for you, but I think also trust for her to like really want to bring you in to this idea that she had of, well, like we need to create something back here at home. And
Mhm.
Sheila, she probably couldn't think of a better person than you to have to offer that kind of insight because you've lived it,
Mhm.
and yeah, and I just find that the moment when uh, I guess Elaine and Takako were launching Musizi, was there like a definitive? I know that it was kind of building up to it, but was there like a definitive moment where she was like, "Hey, let's go all in on this. Like we need you to come in, like like quit your job. Like you gotta go. You gotta 100% effort into this. Like was there something like that? And like how
Oh
did you
yes.
feel? How did you feel in that moment of decision?
Oh yes. I remember that moment vividly. That was 2 years ago. About 2 years ago. Elaine came out here to the Bay Area and she stayed with me. And we went up to the mountains actually. I picked her up. She flew into Reno. I picked her up. We stayed up in Tahoe. And it was just, and I wanted to know more about Musizi. And then, you can imagine how the conversations would go, making a meal at the end of the day. And I'd ask, so how is it going? How is Musizi going? And of course, I've known about Musizi for all this time. And I have been a quiet advisor, a sounding board up until that point. And so about 2 years ago, she comes to me and she says, Sheila, I want us to do this. We need to do this. We need to formalize this and move forward. Um, will you partner with us? Formally, will you do this with us, with Takako and me? Up until that point, I'd held myself back because I was one of their biggest cheerleaders in getting Musizi going as they needed any input from me. I was always open and happy to have been called upon to give it. But I held myself back because launching a university is a massive effort. As much as I wanted it to happen, we were talking before the interview briefly about going for the impossible things, the really challenging things that push us. I held myself back because I didn't think that I would be able to give the effort, the time, and the commitment of time and resources and everything that it needed to get off the ground. And I wanted it to succeed so badly that I thought that I would be a liability if I was not able to commit the time that was needed. So I held myself back until 2 years ago when she came to visit and we're up in the mountains, we're talking about Musizi, and she says, Sheila, we're going to do this. She looked me dead in the eye. She said, we're going to do this. Will you partner with me? And I knew at that point I could not look away. I could not make up any other reason not to actively help Musizi get off the ground because, it was head and heart for me. I looked at my own journey coming up, the fact that I had the fortune of getting these scholarships that opened up my life and changed so much. And I remember thinking back in the classroom that Elaine and I shared, there were so many other smart girls in that classroom. Some of them, many of them smarter than me. But I happened to know about this opportunity because the scholarship opportunity, because my mom knew about the program, and she made sure that I went to the interview and did all the things that I needed to do. But if the other girls' moms had done the same, they could have, had that opportunity, and their lives could have changed. And so I thought to myself, who am I to walk away from this? Who am I to walk away from Musizi? If I do nothing else in my life and I did Musizi, I would be happy. I would be so privileged that I had this opportunity to get Musizi off the ground. And so that was 2 years ago, my come to Jesus moment. And also supported by one of our senior advisors, Neil Collins, also sent me a lengthy email that, and you did meet Neil at the event, that was really a sharing of what he saw Musizi to be, what he saw in me at the time that I didn't even see in myself, in terms of thinking about, I need to be able to do all these things for Musizi to be successful. Um, and so he brought perspective to say, you can do this. Whatever comes in the future, you'll be able to course correct and make Musizi successful. So that was 2 years ago, and I've been so fortunate to be a part of the team. And I joined specifically 2 years ago. I joined the board, the foundation board, and only recently, more responsibilities came my way, including becoming a co-founder, which is such a privilege and an honor to be co-founding Musizi alongside Takako and Milling.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. I was getting goosebumps listening to it because again, it's not every day you found a university, and it just feels like this building, this like kind of, I don't know if it's a slow burn, but like like
It was a slow burn.
your relationship, right? You were like the secret advisor, or I think you said something like that. Kind of constantly in the know, but not like both feet in the same way that Elaine was. And then come to find at the critical moment 2 years ago in in the woods of like Lake Tahoe, she's staring you straight in the eyes and saying it's now or never. And what an Sheila, they're gonna make movies about this moment. I'm just gonna say it right now, okay? That it's gonna be amazing, and I can't wait to watch it in theaters. Because it's like this moment of decision on your part that like this culmination, right? That for all that your life has transformed through the education that you received and the opportunities, here was an opportunity for you. I mean, you were like literally your life changed in that moment, right? In deciding now I'm going to go all in to
Mhm.
to start this university. And
Right.
I think it's so great to hear that you made that decision, and that you're kind of running in lockstep with your co-founders, and there's still so much work to be done, but you're more than enough, right, for it. And I think if anything, it's that sense of mission, like internalizing it, that
Mhm.
actually will carry you through all of it, right? It's not about all the kind of nitty gritty. It's like those things will get, kind of figured out as you
As we
walk the
go.
path. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, and also, at the time when I said yes, I was still working a cruise, and the juggle was pretty intense. But then, but even then, the thing that had stopped me, the thing that had held me back, I was now living it, and somehow it was working out. And I was open about, hey guys, this is a busy week for me. This is happening, or would make provisions for one another, and all that was possible. I think for me, the realization that if you want something so bad, sometimes perfection can be the enemy of the good. I think, was that Voltaire who said that? Don't let perfection be the
Mm,
enemy of the good. I
mm.
was waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect set of key ingredients to be present before I would say yes. And you just got to do it.
Just jump in. Yeah.
Just jump in.
Wow. Well, so now that you're fully in, and you're, swimming, right? Just, it's, there's, again, this exciting vision that you're all working towards with the launch of the university, right? Welcoming the first cohort of students, And, I kind of wanted to ask you a little bit more about how your formation in going to like a UWC and then going to a liberal arts college like Macalester, and you
Mm,
said that it helped you to ask these kind of questions that spurred on new learning, right? New reflections, yeah, curiosity. Um, I'm curious to like if you can maybe share about how that training, right? In
mhm.
terms of yeah, going to those particular schools helped broaden your perspective, and then also tying it into the concept of like global citizenship. Was that a conversation that would come about not only within the classroom but also in the ways in which you shared that with Elaine over the years? Like, did that kind of like naturally kind of come up, and was there like particular fascination that she might have had and like hearing that? Because again, being in just Uganda, probably it's
Mhm.
hard to understand how your roommate might be from Japan or all these other countries where you're like, well, I don't even know where that one country is or what language they speak. And so yeah, I'm
Nice.
just curious if you can like kind of just dig a little bit more into those past experiences, like what was very memorable from like maybe each of the schools that you brought into this conversation of like, yeah, kind of really bringing out your full potential as a student, but also maybe as a global citizen.
Mm-hmm. No, I love this. So global citizenship, I mean, when I hear that term, you know, I don't think, I think I lived that term first before I actually heard it for the first time. Um, and actually it dates back to before UWC. So growing up in Uganda, we were already navigating between different worlds, the local African traditions and sort of the colonial legacies of our education system, which I talked about, referenced earlier, but also the cultural vestiges of the English system. We have tea and biscuits, and the way we talk and spell our words are still very English, but also a rapidly globalizing economy at the time. Um, but I think the moment that term really crystallized for me was when I arrived at UWC as a teenager. And suddenly I was living in a dorm with young people from like 80 plus countries, you know, um, sharing meals and simple things like even how we talked on the phone. Like some people were softer on the phone, some people were loud and boisterous. Some people would make various meals and maybe wouldn't clean up because in their culture they sit down and eat the meal and then clean up. So like various cultural norms and ways of being that really expressed themselves on day one. And then I realized that the way that I saw the world was just one way. It wasn't the default, it wasn't the right one necessarily, it was just mine. And knowing that cracked something open in me in a way, because I realized that my view of things was only partial, and there was more to uncover. I remember my first year roommates. So UWC is a 2-year boarding school program. And the first year, they put the first years with second years who are graduating. And then when you are a second year, you have first year roommates. And so they sort of revolve them out that way. So my first year, my roommates were from Wales, Germany, and Canada. Wonderful friends that I'm still in touch with, one of them, but wonderful experience living with them. And I remember my German roommate should call her family, and a lot of times they wouldn't pick up the phone right away. And so she would say, "Oh, call me back." That happened often enough that I learned how to say "call me back" in German. Just because I had a German roommate who would always call her family and they perpetually were never around. So she would always be like, "Uf man zurück." So today I know a few German phrases, including that. But all that to say, like, you're living in close quarters with young people that are interrogating their ways of being. Like, what's happening in Chechnya? What's the role of the UN? What does peace and conflict mean? Like, how do we resolve that? How do you think about hegemony? how do we think about our role in the world, and, what can we do? What's within our power? And how do we start small and build from there? UWC had a focus on community service as part of the curriculum. And I remember when I got to Wales, I didn't know how to swim. And my family didn't have the means to send me to a place where I could learn how to swim. So I did not have that skill set. But I signed up to do the lifeguard service because I figured if I take a crash course, and at the end of that crash course, I'm a lifeguard, I'll have learned how to swim. And this is going to be the carrot at the end of the stick. And then I'll teach other kids how to swim, having freshly learned how to swim myself. And I remember talking about that with my French lifeguard service, the head of the lifeguard service. I said to him, "Hey, dude, I don't know how to swim, but I want to sign up for lifeguard service. Can we do it?" And he nodded and said, wait, let's do it. And we did. And I remember, and I don't know if it was something innate in me that I always loved to push my boundaries, but I also looked around at the kids around me, and they were doing crazy things. They were doing things that were stretching their boundaries, and really humbling themselves in conversations that brought out their curiosity. So I said to myself, I gave myself permission to do the same. So I guess maybe in a roundabout way, that's part of how I see, in some small way, being a global citizen, being in spaces with people, and really seeking out real differences and not like curated diversity, not necessarily. There's a version of global that is still very comfortable and very like-minded. UWC worked really well because it wasn't just cosmetic. It put young people from genuinely different backgrounds in close proximity and asked them to build community with each other. And in my professional life, that has meant seeking out co-leads and collaborators and advisors from contexts that are different from my own, and actively listening to what they see that I do not. And following my curiosity into uncomfortable places, and knowing that I would be able to rescue myself, self-rescue if things went south,
Like a lifeguard would.
Exactly, like a lifeguard would, right? Knowing that my brain won't let me down. Like if I follow this path, I have done really tough things. I moved when I was 16 on my own without my family, and then continued to move to the US on my own without my family. And I've done, also challenging things in between. And, why can't I continue to do that? And so, in terms of doing hard things, and when I moved to Wales and when I moved to the US, there was a feeling of being an outsider, and at this point, I've spent most of my life away from Uganda, and I'm just feeling like I'm from somewhere else. And for a while, that discomfort was not great, but then it became a teaching tool. And then as I started to lean more into it, um, it became more of an asset than something to be sad about necessarily. But yeah, that it's very complicated when you have questions about where you belong and on all those things, which are what they are. But being the idea of being a global citizen is sort of founded in knowing that I'm Ugandan, American now, but also in very many ways. I don't know if you've heard about the term third culture kid, where you're not really, you don't really feel very one way or another. Like I don't feel too American. I don't feel too Ugandan at this point, having spent most of my life away. But my identity has been forged by the overlap of the two cultures. And so being this third culture kid has given me this amazing perspective on things, and I get away with things sometimes. I can say, "Oh, I'm not American. I wasn't born here," and I get a pass. And when I'm in Uganda, I say, "Oh, I've been away for so long. What do I know?" but all that's, that's being light about it. But when I think about my identity in that perspective, I really, I'm grateful. I'm grateful that this is the life that and the perspective that I now have, 40 years into this journey, um, and being grounded in my long-term relationships to Uganda. This is a place where, when I think about home, somebody asked me recently, Sheila, so where do you define home? You live in the Bay Area, but you're from Uganda, and the mountains are your happy place. Where is home for you? Um, and to answer that question, I say home for me is where the people that I love are. Um, and I have people that I love in the Bay Area, and I have people that I love in Uganda, and I'm so fortunate to have multiple homes. And to be a global citizen, I don't think the goal is not to belong anywhere. Like, really treasure the deep roots that you have to a place, wherever that is, and also um, seek the joys and the meaning, and um, and the sense of belonging, however that looks in your new place. I think the goal is not to discard where you are in pursuit of being a global citizen, um, but to celebrate those deep roots in the context that you're currently in.
Mm. Wow. Sheila, you just shared so much great wisdom. And, I think you were probably lucid at one point, because I was just like, whoa, she's onto something. This is so amazing. Um, and I just wanted to comment on a few things really quick before I ask the next question. Because, of course, right, UWC, United World College, like you said, is, is where you did your high school years, very formative years. But it just felt like, yeah, you were kind of thrown into this environment where you were just asking all these questions, right? You were encountering so many differences, and yet you were trusted to be bold, and to build community. And both things you did, and everyone else around you also did. And it's just, I think those friendships, continuing on, or those memories of, like, yeah, like my German roommate, and like, like picking up on small little things like that. I think it's just so wonderful. It adds important texture to just how complex everyone's partial view of the world really is. And then
Yes.
you talked about the like, what does it mean, like, to be from like one country, but to have lived in another country for so long, a third culture kid. And it's like, the word home, I think, really anchors all of it for me. And you said it's about the people, right, that you love. And
Mhm.
I think, the more friendships you can build and have people all around the world, gives this sense of like, well, if I go to, I don't know, Thailand, but I have that one friend there, that becomes
Yes.
home, right? Or you go back to McAllister, and, you see that one friend or that group of friends that you studied with, you're teleported back in time, and,
Yep.
and
My
that's
beloved
home.
professors.
And the professors as well. And I actually wanted to ask the next question about that, because I find that with undergrad years, especially, it really kind of like cements certain things in terms of our attitudes, our dispositions, right? The way that we see the world. It's that solid foundation that we then kind of launch off from,
Mhm.
and oftentimes we have great pride in the where we went and did undergrad. And I could tell that you have great pride for McAllister, because when we were at the event in LA, it was a Claremont McKenna College event. Everyone was from that school, it seems like, except for like me and you. And you very confidently said that you graduated from McAllister. And so to face, that crowd and still confidently and passionately say how much you love your college means, it really meant so much to you. So I guess
Mm.
I want to ask, like, what's one thing in particular about McAllister that you just truly cherish even to this day? And is
Mm.
that, would you say that's the same thing that you're hoping, students from Musizi will also experience when they graduate in the future from their undergrad?
I love all your questions, Scott. Oh my gosh. Um, When I think about McAllister, honestly, my professors, my beloved professors. And so I just came back from my 20th year reunion just a few weeks ago. I don't know where the time goes, but there you have it. I remember when I was an undergrad and I would see alumni coming back for alumni reunion weekend, and they were coming back for their 15, 20-year reunions, thinking, oh my gosh, these people are so old. And now to be the person that's old myself, I love how life works like that. But no, when I went back, it had been quite a bit of time since I'd been back to Mac, just schedules hadn't worked out. And I went back to the science building where I spent the majority of my time. Like I mentioned, I took classes, the humanities outside of science, but the majority of my time was spent in the science building. The Olin Rice building is what we call it. And I could be blindfolded, but I'll find my way back to the physics department. So I'd sent an email to my advisor, my physics advisor, who I took most classes with. He supervised my thesis work as a senior. And I said, hey, Professor Heyman, his name is Professor James Heyman. Hey, Professor Heyman, I'm coming back for alumni reunion weekend. You'll be on campus? And he said, hi, Sheila, I'll be around. It may just be me, but, it'll be very good to see you. And so that first day back at McAllister, 9:30 in the morning, I found my way back to Olin Rice. And I knocked on Professor Heyman's door and he turned around and I was transported back to being an undergrad, to being advised by him, to tinkering in experiments, to blowing a few things up in the lab, but always finding a soft landing and talking about, okay, why did that not work out? What else is there to explore here? And then also as an undergrad, as an international student in McAllister, really as an international student in the US, and things may have changed a little bit. I was on student's visa, an F1 visa. And with that comes restrictions on what you can and can't do. If you wanted to do internships or work off campus, you couldn't quite do that as an F1 student. So I remember I wanted to do research in the summertime. I wanted to do physics work. I wanted to really augment my technical skills. And Professor Heyman created opportunities for me to do research on campus in the summertime. On occasion, I applied to some NSF programs that would have taken me off campus, and I didn't get them because I'm not a U.S. citizen. And he said, Sheila, don't worry, we have work to do here. And he crafted programs and research projects for me to do on campus. So he was really my ally, really in my corner, understanding that this kid has so much potential and she's hardworking, and our international laws are what they are, but she gets to work in my lab and I'll make sure that it's a meaningful summer for her. I worked with him a couple of summers. So a couple of weeks ago when I went back to our building and I saw Professor Heyman, I was just taken back, and as an adult now interacting with him as a peer, I was moved almost to tears, really. And I thought about, wow, you were my professor, but also you were an ally for me. This kid is so far away from home, um, trying to navigate America for the first time. And all that, and meeting me in a technical capacity, but also as a champion for me, and really to stretch me in ways beyond the physical realm. I think I I appreciated that from my McAllister experience, and I carry that deeply in my heart. And so going back to McAllister, that was a highlight for me. Of course, walking the grounds and going to the library and going to the student center, and of course seeing my friends that I hadn't seen in so long, and seeing where the cool work, or hearing about the cool work that everyone's doing, and where they are in life was remarkable. But really seeing my beloved professors, specifically Professor Heyman, was a big highlight for me.
Mm. Wow. Yeah, I could see you just light up when you talking about this beloved professor. Shout out to Professor Heyman, if you're listening. And I think it's really the humanity of the teacher that is so important, right? To go beyond just what is the curriculum, what is the assignments at hand, but to extend opportunities and then to see you, right, and all of your potential, to believe in that potential. I think that also represents a core component of why teachers are so important, right? Professors that really
Oh,
you need to have that. So I have
yeah.
no doubt that the Musizi University will have amazing professor, already has, amazing professors, but continue to expand and support students on their journey, because each one of those students, in the same way that, you have really, excelled in your career and just, really made such a positive impact on the, communities and the companies and everything, that you've come into contact with. Same goes for those future students at Musizi. And I'm sure that, they'll be blown away at their 20th anniversary. They'll be like, oh my gosh, it's a whole new world. It's exciting.
Oh, well, I mean, we'll be
Yeah.
competing in different technologies. But yes, for sure. When you think about students that enroll into a university and the transformative proposition of the education at Musizi, um, we obviously will have a pipeline of students coming to us. They'll come from different backgrounds, and we get to mold them for 4 years. And that molding happens in various ways through the small classroom settings, working with professors, being mentored by the ecosystem that we'll build to mentor our students, you know, and allowing them to, give themselves permission to fail and learn and all that. And really experiential learning will be at the core. It's so important that the pedagogy and the way of teaching will put the student first at Musizi. And I think when I think about my undergrad experience, I felt in very many ways I was put first by the professors that really left an impact on me. And so as we go into Musizi, we'll always have to keep our eye on the pulse of where is our focus? Are we keeping students first in this venture?
Mm, yeah, 100%. That's so important. And students know when you're putting them first or not. So they're
Oh
very
yeah.
attuned to that. They'll tell you. Okay, great. Well, Sheila, this has been so amazing. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I have one more question for you, and it's a simple one. It's book or movie recommendation. I ask all my guests. So, is there anything that comes front of mind that you'd like to share with the listeners?
Yes. So for a book, I'd recommend Born a Crime. And if you can spring for the audiobook, even better because Trevor Noah narrates it himself. And it's so heavy. He touches on so many things: socioeconomics, race, post-apartheid South Africa. It's not framed as a book about global citizenship per se, but it shows it in practice. He really masterfully crafts what it means to grow up navigating different worlds and languages and identities, and it builds empathy around that without trying to lecture you about it. So I quite like that. And then for a film, I would recommend Queen of Katwe. It's been around for a while. It's a story of a Ugandan girl who becomes a chess champion, and it's set in the community that I come from, really, Kampala, urban Kampala, and it's told with dignity and remarkable specificity, and it challenges every assumption about what talent, ambition, and potential look like when they emerge from places that the world tends to overlook. So I would definitely put that on my Apple list or Netflix or wherever it's streaming, or rent it from wherever you can.
I'm so interested. I want to watch that. It's called Queen of, what was it again?
Queen of Katwe,
Katwe.
Katwe.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds like an amazing movie, and I definitely I'm fascinated with the way you said it's like filmed with like dignity, right? I mean, because again, combating like maybe previous assumptions that we might have about where that talent comes from, and just I think also bringing out this genuine story of like, perseverance probably, right? Of like kind of following that passion and seeing where it takes you and being
Mhm.
surprised at the heights that you'll go.
Right.
But then also, and then Born a Crime, I've read the book. Trevor Noah is amazing. Maybe one day we'll get him on the podcast. Sheila, could you reach out to your friend Trevor? You
I,
you
I'm
got that
gonna
pull?
I'm gonna reach out.
Okay, I'm counting on you. Well, thank you so much, Sheila. I really enjoyed this opportunity to connect with you again, to learn more about Musizi, and also I would say, even more importantly, right, your intertwining story with Musizi. It's so beautiful. You're truly a global citizen. You're surrounded by global citizens, and you're going to be fostering more global citizens to make the world a better place. And wanted to give you the last word. So, any final send off as we wrap up this conversation?
Thank you, Scott. Thank you to your listeners, and I hope what I shared has a nugget that can change something in your listeners. Thank you.